Hello and welcome to the Indian Council of Medical Research online course on Prescribing Skills 2020 for the Indian medical graduates. I am Dr. Jaya Ranjalkar and today I am going to talk about prescribing antimicrobials rationally for common conditions. After viewing this video, please answer 5 multiple choice questions on this video and give a feedback. You will find these questions in the assignment section. So now this slide shows the outline of this module and the headings under which this topic will be covered. So coming to why is this topic important? So India continues to face a high burden of infectious diseases. Acute fevers account for a significant percentage of both outpatient visits and inpatient admissions. At least 20 to 50% of the hospital visits are due to fevers in both adults as well as in children over 5 years. Some of the challenges which we face in managing these fevers is that etiology of these fevers is varied, which means that fever could be both due to infectious and non-infectious causes. Within infectious causes, the fever could be again due to bacteria, virus, protozoa, etc., which complicates the diagnosis and management part. Another challenge which we routinely see is that clinical features and magnitude of severity is varied, and also confirmative diagnosis of these actually requires some special tests to be performed, which may not be always available, especially if you are working in the peripheral areas, and also this may not be always affordable because these are quite expensive. Over and above all this, antibiotic resistance has further complicated disease management. So this slide here shows the learning objectives. At the end of this module, the learner shall be able to achieve the following objectives. So this is the list of prioritized conditions for this module. So now with the help of a case study, we will be seeing how do we start approaching fevers and their diagnosis. So now let's see the case here. So we have a 20-year-old male hostel resident who presented to an outpatient clinic with the history of high-grade fever with chills for the past 5 days. So the patient also gives us an history of generalized weakness, headache for the last 2 days. However, there is no history suggestive of upper respiratory tract or lower respiratory tract infection. Also, there is no history of altered bowel habits, headache or burning micturition. The patient did take paracetamol for this illness, but the fever did not subside completely. However, there is no history of any antibiotic consumption. After you did general examination, you have noted the following points. The patient did have a fever of 104 degrees and his pulse rate was 82 beats per minute, suggesting there was relative bradycardia. His blood pressure, respiratory rate and other findings were not that significant, except that he had a small maculopapular rash localized over the chest. On systemic examination, there was diffuse tenderness on per abdomen examination. There was also mild splenomegaly but no hepatomegaly. The examination of other systems was within normal limits. So based on these findings, a provisional diagnosis of acute undifferentiated fever could be made. So now we will show you an algorithm which will help you understand how do we start approaching and diagnosing these conditions. Supposing any fever is there for more than 2 days and less than 2 weeks duration, the first and foremost thing what we do is we look for sepsis or features of sepsis. So sepsis is generally manifested by altered sensorium, low systolic blood pressure and a high respiratory rate. So we are highlighting sepsis here because untreated sepsis has a very high mortality rate. So it is important that you start parenteral broad spectrum antibiotics as well as parenteral fluids and manage the patient appropriately without any delay. However, if there are no features of sepsis, such as in our case, the next step what we do is we look for organ specific focus. So if you see organ specific focus, we mainly mean that whether there is any localized features. For example, presence of cough, breathlessness suggests that the disease is probably localized to respiratory tract. And suppose there is localization, what we do is we proceed based on those investigations and those guidelines. However, if there is no such localization, then we have to use the other side of the algorithm. So now coming back to our case, there was no localization for this patient, and what we do is now we assess the patient based on detailed history, clinical features, and we also consider host, agent, environment and epidemiological factors, which means that you should also note what medication the patient is currently on, and you should also note whether there is any ongoing epidemic in the community such as dengue or malaria, etc. So once you consider a detailed history of all these factors, the next thing what you do is you look whether there are any red flags present. Red flag is nothing but it could be either a sign or a symptom which you find either in the history or in examination, which suggests that the disease is going to get worsened, and that is when you need to start empiric therapy. However, if there are no red flags, what you can do is you can wait for the investigations to be available. And how do we decide when to order investigations? If the fever is only for day 1 or day 2, what we do is we defer antimicrobials and investigations. So, most of the times the infections are acute and self-limited and they resolve by their own without any intervention required. However, you always support the patient with symptomatic therapy such as giving adequate fluids, taking adequate rest, and paracetamol you can use at the doses mentioned here. But suppose the fever is for day 3 or day 4, what we do is we start ordering the baseline investigations as mentioned here, and we also do rapid diagnostic test for malaria or blood smear for malaria. This is because malaria is extremely common in India and it also causes high mortality if it is not properly diagnosed and treated. Hence, it is suggested that all the cases of acute undifferentiated fever be tested for malaria. If you find that a patient is positive for malaria, you could start treating for malaria. If not, you could go on doing the other investigations. So, while you are doing tests for malaria, if you think the patient could also have dengue, especially if there is an ongoing epidemic in your community, you could also test for dengue at this time point. So, supposing the fever is for day 5 or more, such as in our case, what we do is we also do blood culture in addition to the tests which are suggested for day 3 or day 4. So, now as we have seen already, our initial diagnosis was a case of acute undifferentiated fever and the following differentials were considered. So, for the differentials what we have considered, we have given the clinical features, how they present in both uncomplicated and complicated scenarios, and we have also listed specific diagnostic tests which are there in practice. So, you could refer to the guidelines which are given at the end of this module to better understand what investigations have to be ordered on which day and how to interpret them. So, now coming back to our case study, the initial diagnosis was acute undifferentiated fever and the differential diagnosis was malaria, dengue, enteric fever, leptospirosis and scrub typhus. And because we ordered all the investigations, what we found is that the blood culture was positive for Salmonella typhi, and based on this a final diagnosis of acute uncomplicated enteric fever was made. So, even though the diagnosis for this patient was enteric fever, all these conditions, especially all the differentials here, present in a very similar manner, and knowing them is very important because each of them have their individual treatment regimens, and hence we will be seeing the management of all these conditions individually in the upcoming slides. So, now let us see definitive therapy for the prioritized conditions. So, the first condition which we will be covering is enteric fever. So, enteric fever is a systemic illness caused by bacteria belonging to Salmonella typhi and Salmonella paratyphi. It is usually manifested as a high grade fever which is continuous, and the patient also may have abdominal complaints such as vomiting, diarrhea or constipation. The management of enteric fever depends whether the patient is having complicated or uncomplicated. If the patient is having uncomplicated enteric fever, it could be managed as an outpatient therapy with the medicines mentioned here. However, if the patient is having complicated enteric fever, you may have to admit the patient and give parenteral medications at the doses given here. There are some important do's which you have to remember when you are treating for enteric fever. The first and foremost is the duration of enteric fever treatment is usually on the higher side, that is 10 to 14 days, and it is important that you counsel the patient about adherence. In case if you are starting the patient on a broad parenteral therapy, you should shift to oral therapy as soon as possible based on the antibiotic susceptibility results. And you should also note that the doses which are used for enteric fever are based on dose per kg body weight and usually on the higher side than the standard doses. So, when you are doing rounding off, you should round off on the higher side. For example, if the patient requires 600 mg of one drug and the preparation is only available for 500 and 750, then you should be using 750 mg and not 500 mg. And also, in view of high amount of quinoline resistance in India, fluoroquinolones such as ciprofloxacin are no longer recommended as first line agents until unless you have facilities to test for their MIC values and susceptibility patterns. So, the next condition which we will be seeing is malaria. So, malaria is caused by Plasmodium and there are 5 species known, out of which 2 are extremely common in India, that is Vivax and Falciparum. It is transmitted by the bite of female Anopheles mosquito, and treatment of Vivax is with the help of 2 agents, that is mainly chloroquine and primaquine, which are given at the doses mentioned here. So, the role of primaquine here is for the radical treatment to eliminate the hypnozoids or dormant forms of these organisms, and if you do not use the primaquine, the patient could have relapse after few weeks or few months. And however, you should note that primaquine is contraindicated in pregnant women, breastfeeding mothers, infants and G6PD deficient patients. You should also warn the patient, supposing you do not have facilities to test for G6PD deficiency, you could still start primaquine if the patient is having normal hemoglobin level, and you want the patient to report to you if he notices some adverse effects such as dark colored urine. So let us see prescribing for Plasmodium falciparum. So Plasmodium falciparum, if it is uncomplicated, could be managed with artemisinin based combination therapy. Artemisinin based combination therapy makes use of two drugs. One is artemisinin analogs, and second is another drug which acts by a different mechanism. This combination results in a more lasting cure for the patient, and the current national guidelines recommend using the following artemisinin based combination therapy throughout India except in northeastern part of country. And supposing you are from northeastern part of India, we use another combination, that is artemether and lumefantrine at the doses given here. So this is because there is resistant even to the above combination in northeastern part of India. The second line regimen for treating falciparum is another ACT combinations which are approved by the government of India, and you could read more about them in the reference material 1 given along with this module. So now let us suppose the patient is having complicated malaria. So complicated malaria needs parenteral therapy, and here again we use artemisinin derivatives as the first line agent because of their higher efficacy, and you could use artesunate or artemether as the first choice at the doses given here. However, suppose you do not have access to either artesunate or artemether, you could use quinine at the doses given here. So quinine usually causes some adverse effects such as hypotension, hypoglycemia. So it is important that you give it at a very slow rate with careful monitoring of adverse effects. Supposing you do not have facilities to treat complicated malaria, you could still start a first dose of artesunate or artemether. Some preparations are also available as a rectal preparations, especially in children, and then you refer the patient to a higher center with proper notes of the clinical management, whatever you have done till now. And finally, once the patient is stabilized and has completed at least 24 hours of the therapy, then you stop the initial parenteral drugs and shift to full course of oral ACT as per the guidelines. So the next differential for this patient was dengue fever. So dengue fever is caused by viruses belonging to the family Flaviviridae. There are 4 dengue viruses known, that is DE and V, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So it is a viral condition, but there are no antivirals available at this time point, and hence the management has to be done symptomatically, and antibiotics are not effective for treatment of viral infections, and they do not have any role unless until there is a secondary bacterial infection. So the current management lies mainly in the symptomatic therapy in the form of paracetamol and maintaining adequate hydration and fluids along with adequate rest. So for the ease of management, dengue fever is categorized into 3 types. The first type is dengue fever without any warning signs, and in these cases outpatient management with symptomatic therapy is enough. The second category is dengue fever with warning signs, where the patient may have persistent vomiting or abdominal pain. So in these cases you need to admit the patient and give parenteral fluids. The third category is severe dengue, where there is already some organ involvement and there is evidence of plasma leakage. So these patients again need admission and intensive therapy. So you could read the reference material 2 for more details on how to administer parenteral fluids in dengue patients. And the important note here while treating dengue fever is that because the main pathology lies in damage to the vascular endothelium and bleeding complications, it is important that you do not use NSAIDs such as aspirin and brufen. Finally, you counsel the patient for avoiding future mosquito bites. So the next differential for this patient was leptospirosis. Leptospirosis is caused by bacteria belonging to Leptospira. This is actually a zoonotic condition. Both wild animals and domestic animals serve as reservoirs and carriers for this infection. And what happens is that these animals excrete the bacteria in their urine, which in turn contaminates water bodies and soil. And human beings get this infection when we are exposed to this contaminated water by means of abrasions in the skin or mucous membrane. People at risk include people who are working in the paddy fields, sievers, those who are exposed to flood water, and those who are involved in recreational water sports. If it is uncomplicated, the patients could be managed as an outpatient therapy with the medicines listed here. However, if it is complicated, leptospirosis tends to involve liver and kidneys and result in complications called as Wheal syndrome, and these patients need admission and parenteral therapy as per the drugs listed here. So in endemic areas, empiric therapy with doxycycline is suggested. So the last differential for this patient was Krupp typhus. Krupp typhus is a rickettsial illness and it is a zoonotic condition which is transmitted by the bite of mites, especially chiggers, which are nothing but the larval stages of these mites. And since it is transmitted by bite, you can actually note a eschar. Eschar is nothing but a vascular region with a necrotic center, and presence of this eschar is considered a diagnostic of scrub typhus. However, it may not be there in all the cases. Uncomplicated cases usually present with high grade fever, eschar, myalgias, headache, diarrhea, etc., and could be managed as outpatient therapy with the medicines listed here. Scrub typhus, if it is complicated, it tends to involve organs such as GIT, CNS, respiratory tract, and could cause complications such as aseptic meningitis, acute respiratory distress, atypical pneumonia, etc. And hence it is important that you admit these patients and start parenteral therapy with the medicines listed here. In endemic areas, empiric treatment with doxycycline is suggested. This is again similar to leptospirosis, because both the conditions could actually progress very fast from uncomplicated to complicated, and then they have very high mortality rate. So, that is why we suggest that if you have a suspicion, you can straight away start doxycycline without waiting for the investigations to be available. So, supposing a patient is presenting to you in a seriously ill state, and you have to start antibiotics. So, what you could do is, depending on the organism which you think, you could start the regimens given here, which are different for both gram positive and gram negative organisms. And supposing you think it could be due to tropical fever, you could start the initial treatment as per the regimen given here. And once you get results from the investigation, you could shift to the definitive therapy as we have discussed previously. So, now here we have listed some do's and don'ts for the prioritized conditions. These are already covered in the earlier slides. So, some of the common do's include using body weight dosing, reporting notifiable diseases, etc. Some of the common don'ts are given here. So, the last topic for this module is do's and don'ts, which are common for all the infectious diseases, and note on antimicrobial stewardship. These do's and don'ts apply for all the infectious diseases, and it is important that you incorporate them in your routine clinical practice. Most common do which we suggest is that always try to get a diagnosis and at least have a differential diagnosis. Do ensure all the investigations, especially blood cultures, are sent before starting therapy, especially antibiotic therapy, and always restrict antimicrobial therapy only for life threatening conditions or conditions which may benefit by using antibiotic. Always try to adhere to the standard treatment guidelines, be it national guidelines or local guidelines or state guidelines, and always document dose, day of antibiotic therapy and review date in chart, so that harm due to antibiotic use is minimized, and always de-escalate wherever possible from broad spectrum to narrower spectrum, and also stop antibiotic therapy if it is no longer needed. Finally, counsel the patient on important aspects related to antibiotic use and the importance of adherence. Some of the common don'ts are do not treat viral infections with antibiotics, and do not prescribe more than one antibiotic with similar spectrum. As we have seen already, antimicrobial resistance has complicated the disease management. It is important that antibiotics are used rationally, and in an effort to promote rational use of antimicrobial stewardship was designed. It is nothing but a systematic way of rationally using antibiotic, and it is mainly based on the principles of using right drug, dose, duration, diagnosis, and prompt de-escalation. So, always try to incorporate these principles in your routine clinical practice. So, now coming to the take home messages. To conclude, acute undifferentiated fevers are extremely common in India. Because these conditions do not have localization in the beginning, it is important that you use clues from the history and clinical examination, along with a thorough knowledge of ongoing diseases and their resistant patterns in the community. Routinely, what we suggest is that unless the infection is life threatening or you think it is going to get complicated, do not start antibiotics. However, you always support the patient with supportive therapy in the form of paracetamol, adequate fluids, and adequate rest. Ensure rational antibiotic use, and counsel patients on importance of adherence, and counsel the patient on overall promoting health in the form of safe surroundings, safety from mosquito bites, timely vaccination especially in children, and wearing protective gear, etc. And in reality, you may come across much more complex and unique cases with varied presentations, and in those situations, guidance from seniors and your experience will help in properly managing the patient and safely using antibiotics. So thank you for watching this video. Hope you are now ready for attempting the MCQs. Please access the MCQs in the assignment section and submit the answers. Please also complete the prescription evaluation as per the tutorial, which I hope you have already seen. We wish you happy learning and thank you.